Okay. Hello and welcome, everybody. So we are here for, I think this is our sixth Soul Wisdom Circle with this beautiful group of beings. And my name is Martha Alter Hines, and I am here with Don Brunke, Kelley Hunter, Melanie Reinhart, Heather Ensworth, Julia Balaz, Anne Baring, and Maura McBratney. And what we're going to be doing today is very similar to what we've done in the previous circles. In a minute, I'm going to be handing over the facilitation of this sacred circle to Melanie Reinhart, which is super exciting. And our theme today is going to be being beacons of light and peace. Um, and I want to also give just a very special update for everybody that since our last circle in March, Anne Baring has released her latest book. So we have the link for that book here with the video. Also, Heather and Anne had a wonderful conversation about the book on Heather's YouTube channel. So we're linking that video as well. And I think we all just would love to honor Anne and celebrate you and the amazing work you bring into the world.
Thank you so much, Martha. Lovely to have it mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, a gift.
Mhm.
Um, so just briefly, what I like to say at the beginning of each of these videos every time, I'm going to say it again, which is that the purpose of these circles, among other things, is to really demonstrate and invite us all in, each of you, into sacred circle and into the reality that every single one of us, not just those of us on this screen, but every single one of you is a being of ancient wisdom of existence. And we are each needed. The divine puzzle piece of every single one of us is needed in this moment, now more than ever, right? So I would love to invite you to imagine yourself, bring yourself fully present, fully right here with us. You can just imagine that we're all sitting together in this sacred space. Um, and we are all equally needed, equally wise, equally perfect in our divinity and our humanness as well. Um, and the other little thing I'll just throw in there just to set the context for our theme today is that so our theme again is today is being beacons of light and peace. And when I was praying on this morning, my guides asked me to just contextualize that when we're focusing on light, which I do a lot in my work, and I know we all do, it's not a dichotomy. We're not presenting a dichotomy between light and dark, right? So the way I experience things in my praying is that the void, which is kind of an ultimate dark, holds everything, including the light. And the way that I'm shown it is that the light comes out of the void. So this is not a light versus dark conversation. This is a holding the all and being beacons of light and peace within the all. Yeah.
Mm.
So with that, yay, here we are. Handing it over to you, Melanie.
Thanks, Martha. So, welcome everybody, wherever you are, probably in many different places across the earth at the moment. So, I'd like to kind of open our time together by sharing with you a grounding process, which is one that I use a lot and have done really since the discovery of the Centaur planetoid called Chariclo. Some of you may already know that in the discovery chart of Chariclo, there is a absurdly perfect six-pointed star in the connections between the various planets. And so the six-pointed star is composed of two triangles, one pointing up and the other one pointing down. And they're superimposed. And I just found it a very alluring kind of a symbol and began just spontaneously using it for myself. Later, I realized that in the alchemical tradition, a little six-pointed star is their symbol for the quintessence. So in alchemy, they have variations on a theme of little triangles, either with or without lines across. And I realized that all the four elements, earth, fire, air, water, they all fit inside the six-pointed star. But that symbol, the six-pointed star, is used to refer to the quintessence, which in the alchemical tradition would be equated with the philosopher's stone or the divine elixir. And at the same time, I think we can link it with what you said, Martha, about it being like the void, which holds everything and is both nothing and everything. And so it has a very particular kind of grounding quality. So I'm going to just briefly guide you through a little exercise. And just to say that it's one that I've used in a number of different ways. And so as I'm guiding you through, you might find that your experience develops into something slightly different than what I'm saying. So then, don't get into a struggle over that, but just go with what comes as we go through the exercise, which I look forward to sharing with you. So to begin with, just become aware of your breathing. And you don't have to change anything, but just settle into your breath how it is. And then as your breath rhythm kind of stabilizes a bit, be aware of your in-breath, preferably through your nose, and then also the little pause before you have an out-breath, preferably through your mouth, then another little pause, and then another in-breath. In other words, take into account the entire cycle of the breath, in and out and in between. And if you haven't already done so, just gently close your eyes. And beginning with being aware of whatever you're sitting on, let yourself just feel physically supported. And begin to turn your attention to your inner world. And in this inner world, you see very far above your head a star shining and glittering. As it gets closer to you, it's kind of descending into contact with you. And you allow the star to get closer and closer until its energy and vibrancy actually is able to enter your space. Perhaps even enter within your body's energy system. So you become aware of the two interlocked triangles. The point remains above your head, and the two corners of that triangle may perhaps land one on each hip. So there is the upward pointing triangle, and the downward pointing triangle begins way below your physical body in the earth being that holds us. And the two corners may go up to each of your shoulders. And in the middle of this is the heart space. So in your imagination, allow yourself to be centered in this heart space, surrounded by the six-pointed star of the quintessence. And just let that experience kind of bed in a little bit so that you can take time to really feel it. And then you become aware that everyone on this call, whether on screen or there in your own home, are also like beings containing this six-pointed star, in the middle of which is the heart space, which has a very gentle glowing flame there, like an etheric flame. And furthermore, that actually everybody everywhere has this same structure as a human being. And in this way, we are all beacons of light and peace. And may we remember that always. So in your own time now, become aware again of where you're sitting and feel the support from your chair or floor or cushion. And let yourself become aware of the sounds around you in your room, perhaps the fan of the computer or sounds from the street outside. So let yourself tune into the sounds around you, and when you're ready, just open your eyes. Open your eyes into the sacred circle in which we will spend time together. And I'd like to make a couple of planetary remarks, if I may. There are so many things astrologically that are so interesting about what's going on now. But I just want to specifically mention two. One is that on the 9th of June, just gone, the planet Jupiter entered into the sign of Cancer, where traditionally it's said to be in its exaltation. By contrast, Jupiter in Gemini, where it was for the whole of the last year, backwards from June 9th, Jupiter said to be in detriment, so somewhere not really quite very comfortable, and spinning out a lot of the more complicated and difficult dimensions of the sign. Confusion over communication, outright lies. We've seen it all, right? But in the sign of Cancer, the exaltation, so that can be thought of almost like the planet Jupiter is the honored guest in someone else's home. So showing his best. And the best of Jupiter in Cancer is a very feeling placement. Sign of Cancer really concerns intimate bonds, mostly to do with family, but not exclusively, but they're family-like bonds. And that can include people who we feel like family with. And that can include our fellow travelers of the soul realms, you know. And so there's a great emphasis put on the value of bonds, of attachment. So the whole notion of detachment doesn't really come into it with the sign of Cancer, unless you happen to be born with Uranus there, which many of you watching probably do have that placement. At any rate, it's a time for both generating and also deeply appreciating the bonds that you do have in your life from the past, and also bonds that are forming as we speak that will continue on into the future. Almost the things that we take for granted in that domain take on a whole kind of glowing reality when Jupiter is in Cancer. You might have found, many of you, that this theme is showing up in your dreams already, or even beforehand as a prelude. So it's an energy to really celebrate, you know. And then the other, very intriguing, is that on the 7th of July, another change of sign, and this is a big one. Jupiter moves quite quickly, roughly 1 year per sign. But the planet Uranus is also going to change sign. Uranus spends about 8 years, 7 to 8 years per sign. And so that takes us back to about 2017, I think that's right. And it's going to enter the sign of Gemini. Now, I should declare my hand here, but I actually have Uranus in Gemini myself, which feels like a bit of a shock. So its total cycle takes 84 years. And I'm not on that part of the cycle yet, but I soon will be. And so Uranus is often described by words like unexpected, or a shock, or a turning point, a revolution. It's those kind of things. It brings in the new, the first planet that was discovered by maths and technology, as distinct from naked eye observation. So it represents a real quantum leap place in the sequence of the planets. Planets up to Saturn, its nearest inner neighbor, we can actually see them with our eyes. And Uranus, I believe some people can see it, but in the main not, you know. And so right there is the symbol. The Uranian openings connect us with the invisible world in one way or another. They bring the unexpected, the hitherto completely unknown. And it's really fun because you can really never second guess Uranus. You might look at your transits and think, oh, you know, it's here and there and making this or that aspect, and start getting a sense of what might happen. But you're almost certain to be wrong, because whatever you expect usually is based on what you already know. And that's not the territory of Uranus. It brings in something, it's like, in a million years, you wouldn't have thought of this. And it can be really life-changing. And sometimes it can mean the breaking up of all the structures in our life. And so that can be very uncomfortable, even traumatic. But the process is always about awakening. So we're crossing a threshold with the activity of Uranus. And sometimes that's very uncomfortable. And sometimes it's really obvious, like you move house, you move country, you do something really obvious like that, whether by choice or circumstance. And then there's the inner version, which is an opening in our consciousness, where in fact I've known plenty of people who go through mega Uranus transits and not much changes at all externally. But internally, they are really, really transformed. It operates very powerfully through the mind, Uranian energy, sort of really fits together. And so thinking of it in the sign of Gemini, the theme of communication, well, first perception, how we actually perceive things and what we make of what we see. So our basic understanding of things, new elements will come in. And this is happening collectively already in very exciting ways. The whole notion of the quantum world, it's bringing in Uranus. And of course, all the traditional themes to do with Gemini, communication. There's also the doubling up or the twinship. Things go in pairs or twos. And in many of the mythic stories associated, they can be twins who are at war with each other, fighting with each other in one way or another. And we've got plenty of pairs of fighting twins all over the place now, to the point where I thought, you know, Uranus is not even in Gemini, and look at it, you know, that's going on everywhere. But even deeper, there's something about our relationship to the whole realm of duality anyway, existentially and philosophically. And I do believe that's a really core theme. So I loved Martha's introduction today. And it made me immediately think of Uranus in Gemini, which I hadn't even planned to mention, but I thought I would because it's so relevant. Our struggle with duality is a very defining factor, culturally speaking, in the West, and not only in the West. But understanding the psychological and spiritual dynamics of what's going on there can be incredibly releasing and freeing, because that's one Uranian thing that's very strong. It's about awakening. It's about freeing things up, freeing energy up in order to embrace the new. Sometimes by choice, and sometimes we're just forced to, forced by circumstance. And so, in the classical Greek mythology about Uranus, he is, of course, the consort of Gaia. But there's a lot in the mythology about Uranus and his son Kronos, which is Saturn, whose son is Zeus or Jupiter. In those succession myths, I mean, they're really kind of bloodthirsty. That it's like civilization, as it were, proceeds through treachery, betrayal, violence, you name it, it's all there. And although one can look around and say, well, yeah, I guess maybe that is how it works. And yet, the stories that we tell ourselves, that to me is Uranus in Gemini. So the new stories that we feed our soul with can maybe be something a little different. Because if a whole culture, millennium after millennium, goes on repeating the same myths, well, that's what happens, because that's how it works. But to me, Uranus in Gemini, it's time for the new stories. And so I got curious and started digging around in the mythology, wanting to go back further than the story of Uranus and Gaia as it's usually told. And so I want to briefly mention where that took me. So I'll just mention a brief quote here. This is from Musaeus, who was a student of Orpheus. So here I'm leaning into the Orphic tradition, which way precedes the Greek classical tradition and the Hellenic, which came even later. And so the Orphic tradition was itself a compendium of much more ancient mystery traditions going even back into Egypt, etc. And so they have a different creation myth, which does also involve Uranus. And I want to read a really brief summary of this. And I won't comment. I'll just let you absorb the symbolism and see how it resonates for you. So this is the myth of Phanes, Phanes. And I'm reading this from an article by a writer called Stephanie, that's with an F, Stephanie Goodart. And it's called Shedding Light on Some Orphic Gods. So here is a very brief edited summary. The myth of Phanes. So in the beginning, all was dark, and nothing existed but two winged serpents. They mated and produced a brilliant egg. One serpent wrapped himself around the egg and squeezed it until it broke open. Emerging from within was the winged hermaphroditic deity Phanes. Light radiated from his body that was so bright no one could see him. From the top half of the shell, he created the heaven, and from the bottom portion he created the earth. He mated with himself and gave birth to the goddess Nyx, NYX, which means night. And so the light gave birth to the night. He also mated with Nyx, and she gave birth to Gaia and Uranus. Hines then began to create the physical world. This is all like pre-physical, but then began to create the physical world by assigning a place for the sun, moon, and stars. There's more, but I think I'll just leave it at that. I was so excited when I read that. And I thought, have I never read this before? Did I not know this? Because it just so fits what I've kind of instinctually felt about the creation story. And indeed, Martha, it bears such a similarity to what you were describing today. And so I'll just leave it there, I think. So I'd like to hand over to another lovely lady. Dawn, would you like to say anything?
I would, but this was very deepening and yet expanding, huh? So, yeah, this story I would like to share is very personal, but I think it sheds light on where we are collectively, something that kind of speaks to us all right now. So we're going to get from the very expansive to the very physical, okay? So a few months ago, a crown popped off one of my teeth. And my dentist created a new crown and replaced it, but something wasn't quite right. And later he discovered that there was a tiny infection between the root, which had a root canal, so it wasn't painful, and the crown. And that little infection was trapped, between the two, held between the two. It was really hard to reach, really hard to resolve. So we tried all these various out-of-the-box treatments to avoid surgery. And while I'm still working with it physically, I also began to explore it metaphysically. So for me, it was intriguing, right, that this infection had lodged itself between the root and the crown. And I thought of the root chakra and the crown chakra, of course. Some pathogen was held there, in between my root and my crown, between my survival center and my higher wisdom center. And that hold was blocking the flow between the two, causing dis-ease, right? So about a month ago, I'm still working with this in various ways, and it's very small. It's not like a dangerous, well, all infections are dangerous, but it's not a huge thing. So it's kind of on the back burner. And last month, my massage therapist said, why don't we try lymphatic drainage? And that's a way to kind of detox the body through the lymph and to clear toxins. So we did that, and immediately afterwards, I developed a rash. It was a bright red rash on my upper arms and my legs. It wasn't itchy. It wasn't hot. I'm calling it a rash. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it was very visible, very much wanting to be seen. And it persisted. And I checked in with my massage therapist, my chiropractor, with a dermatologist. No one really had a clear idea of what it was. No one could really identify it. So again, I turned to the symbolism, what's a rash? It's a red flag, right? It's an inflammation of the skin, our largest organ, right? That which it's our boundary, it's our protection. And a systemic rash like that might signal something deeper, something within trying to come out. Grief, old toxins, old emotional pain. I'm asking what in me wants to be released, what wants to be seen. And about a week later came a third issue, because things happen in threes and because my body really wanted me to hear this. So this time it was plantar fasciitis. That's an inflammation of the fascia, that band of connective tissue that, wraps around the foot. It links the heel to the toe. So we're dealing with the sole of the foot, I tell myself, how we move forward, right? How we connect with the earth. And the word soul, S-O-L-E, sounds very much like soul, S-O-U-L. So it makes me wonder, what in my soul is calling for attention here, right? What needs to be stretched? What needs to be heard, acknowledged? And it must be something important because all these three things, and also because plantar fasciitis really hurts. Yeah, it speaks loudly. So over the last few weeks, actually, I've been living with all three of these: the infection, the rash, the heel pain, and because I'm me, I'm talking to them. I'm asking, what do you want? What do you need? What are you trying to tell me? Right? And a few days ago, Martha, when you told us the topic for this one, I'm thinking, well, what if this isn't just personal? What if this is also a reflection of exactly what's happening in the world today? You know, that infection lodged between my root and my crown, it's like a global blockage, right? There's something unresolved. There's the root of our collective foundation, our security, our safety, our survival is disconnected in some way from our higher awareness, our wisdom, our compassion, our spirit. And this type of infection tends to fester. And it's not news that we're currently seeing breakdowns everywhere, right? In leadership, mental health crises, a lot of spiritual bypassing, symptoms of a world whose root and crown are no longer in a graceful flow. The rash, that visible irritation. I think that mirrors our overstimulation, our overstimulated, inflamed world, right? A rash says, this is too much stimulation, too many toxins. It's an emotional and informational overload, an overwhelm, right? So the skin kind of our society, our boundaries, our agreements with other countries, our agreements with each other, our once, which we call it cultural norms, all being tested. So I think the collective rash reveals itself very clearly in polarization, in inflamed political views, inflamed personal views, mass media, social media allergies, kind of to honesty and integration and discernment. And the earth herself is showing us the rash, right? Breaking out in rashes, fires, floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. All of this signs of deeper tensions within, rising to the surface, craving some sort of energetic release. And the sole of the foot, to me, that was the most important, our connection to the earth. It hurts.
Mm.
Just so many people in pain right now. And I think that's because our soul, as well as the soul of the world, is trying to land more fully in us, through us, you know? But the way we've been walking on the earth individually and collectively kind of no longer supports our soul's presence. It's painful and we're limping. Yeah. So what do we have here? Three symptoms: infection between root and crown, between our foundation and our higher wisdom and awareness. We have inflammation at the boundaries where we meet the world, where our inner self meets our outward expressive self, where our physical body meets spirit, right? And we have disconnection between the sole of our feet and the soul of our being, between how we walk on the earth and the deeper reason why we came here.
Mm.
Yeah. So what does it tell us? It's not news. The old ways of breaking down, right? I think it's also telling us that our soul selves, our spirit selves, really want in, not as an abstract ideal, but as a living presence in a very real, embodied way. And that our bodies, mine, maybe yours, definitely the world's, are reacting to the pressure of transformation.
Mm.
We're in a collective initiation, right? We all are. Messy, awkward, can feel scary, disorienting, and can be painful. But when I dig deep, I think, these symptoms are messages too, right? The infection kind of says, clear the channels, let that truth rise from the root to the crown, let it come out. Maybe the rash is asking us if we really need to be so rash. Can we slow down? Can we discern truth? Can we shed what no longer serves, what we no longer need? And the soul reminds us how deeply our soul longs to walk here, huh? On this earth, in this body, mine, yours, all of ours. Can we expand ourselves, stretch ourselves to support that? So these past months, they've been rough. And my body's been reminding me, the chaos, the discord, the pain, all of that can be so difficult, but it's also an invitation. Yeah. An invitation to live more consciously, more sacredly, more holy, to be holy. And I've learned through that awareness that our bodies, our stories, our individual stories, as well as our collective stories, can become oracles. Yeah, they carry messages for us and for each other, even when we feel most alone. And the truth is, we're not alone, right? We're all connected. We all have a lot of help all around us all the time. It just might not be what we think of as help. So I think sometimes illumination, it hides in a small infection. Sometimes it blazes through us, through a rash. Sometimes it whispers to us from a sore heel. But always, it invites us to grow, to awaken, to expand our sense of self. And no matter what our personal story is, I think we help each other by sharing, by listening deeply, by being present. And by doing so, by laughing, crying, creating, witnessing, we become lighthouses for each other. Because this is us, this is all of us right here, right now. And we're all potential beacons of that light and that peace and wisdom. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Dawn. That was really beautiful. Thank you. Julia, would you like to go next?
Thank you. I would like to start with thanking Martha for creating this beautiful container. It's such a gift to be in the presence of grounded wisdom as we are here today. And I also want to acknowledge everyone who received this video at random, served by the algorithm, as I'm becoming more and more aware of how we are all almost being squared into different social chambers of different levels of consciousness based on our history. The algorithm feeds us something certain based on what we enjoy. So I want to acknowledge and appreciation those that received this, and see it as a sign of the beautiful grounded wisdom that you hold, that you carry, that even the AI algorithm is acknowledging that for you. So I'm just deeply honored that for every listener that is here with us and joining us in this circle, how beautiful to find each other in this beautiful space while holding awareness of all the craziness that is in different social chambers online. What is most alive for me is feeling recalibrated, as we all are. But for me in particular, I have, if I mention astrology, I have Saturn, Neptune meeting and recalibrating my natal sun, which is at 0 degrees of Aries in the 11th house in the collective. So this entire year, I feel that presence very strongly. And how it shows up for me is a complete shift from being used to being very active in doing, the excited zero Aries energy that has an idea and let's just do it. And I was very active doer for so long, for decades, to the point where the body said enough. But I am really learning to be to be and observe and feel the power of the presence, of the awareness, and seeing how powerfully it shifts energetics in a group setting, especially when it's a situation that is very triggering for people, for those who still have traumas that are surfacing to be witnessed. In the past, with my astrological configuration the way I am, I would naturally want to immediately support the person through action, through saying something, through helping, hoping to fix them, to change them, to comfort them in some way through action. Whereas this time, I'm very strongly being guided to be in the presence of a witness, and it's completely new experience. I'm also experiencing Uranus approaching my ascendant at 0 degrees of Gemini, and Pluto is on my midheaven. So I have all these major points of my connection to the world being completely recalibrated with these powerful energies, and Jupiter just activated my lunar north node. So complete shift of identity. The main theme really is about shifting from doing to being. So right now I'm almost over doing the being because it was suppressed for so long. So it has to become overly present right now. Um, and as I'm realizing that contrast, while hearing my ego constantly nagging at me, oh, you should do more. Why aren't you doing this? You have so many ideas, take action. But the energetics are just not letting me. It's almost like, no, hold, stay present, observe. And in that, as I'm falling in love with it, I see the richness in every single situation, from the smallest encounters to bigger events that are more triggering. There is such richness. There's so much downloads that come purely from the entire field of information that arises because of that stillness, because of that presence, because of that silence that opens our eyes more, that opens our ears more, and most of all, the heart more, and the entire energetics of the super intelligent human body that, like you said, Dawn, becomes the oracle for us. And then in that presence, noticing how the physiology of people in the presence of someone who is just being is also recalibrating. I've witnessed that first time when I watched interview of Heather sitting with Keone, and he is so whole in his being, so present with his being, that I notice in myself how his beingness is activating and recalibrating my beingness. So then I started observing it in my own reality and how it affects others. So, for example, I was stuck on a boat during the full moon a few days ago in the Mediterranean. We ran out of gas, far away from the land, and then just witnessing, observing how 12 people, 13 actually, with the captain on the boat, were all going through their own experiences of what do we do now? How long are we stuck for? And then the nauseating waves of the sea, and me feeling hyper aware the connection to the Atlantean lifetimes of every person on the boat. And of course, I knew the astrology of the day. I looked at the full moon, and asteroid Atlantis is in exact connection now with collective lunar nodes, quincunx with the collective north node, and 30 degrees connection to the collective south node. So it's very tension forming, energetic, and I could feel how we are all experiencing echoes of something from the past. And then being in the experience of surrender and trust was very quickly allowing those that were triggered purely through physiology, from being just near someone who is present and aware and peaceful. I didn't have a need to explain or to change or comfort through words or action. It was simply through being. And very quickly, their reactiveness just diffused within a matter of, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, and then just went into silence and then going through their own inner processes. And the gift in that situation then was the seagull who flew so far away from the land, sat next to the small boat, staring at me. And I'm sure each of you experience at least once in life where a wild creature locks eyes with you, where you feel seen by the spirit for whatever reason, whatever is most alive for you in that moment. So I hope this serves especially those, and probably most of us. We were so um, conditioned to live in constant doing, and it's so uncomfortable, so unnatural to suddenly be shifting into being. So I would really hope to inspire you to release the guilt of shifting into beingness as you recognize the power of that energetic intelligence that operates on so many levels. It's really quantum, and how much you actually serve the individuals and the collective and your own oversoul that is able to then come more deeper into the physicality of your body. Um, there's something really powerful and beautiful. I'm sure it's nothing new here that I'm sharing, but this is what is most alive for me. So I'm allowing myself uh, to allow this overcompensation for overdoing for decades now, for like really just allowing myself to be and learn so much through that. Pluto just entered my ninth house, so I feel like I'm just learning so much, but not so much through uh, external media, but much more through the field that is present in every situation, communicating and recalibrating the conditionings. And what comes to mind as well with Heather's teachings of the precession of cycles, because the Neptune Saturn is on my Aries, I now realize how much I was living in the Aryan archetype that is anchored in ego that wants to control and dominate and, take action almost forcefully, versus now recalibrating to the higher octave of Aries identity, which is hyper aware of all beautiful individual contributors to the whole and finding a way of co-creating or being in action in alignment with whole, really dropping into the wholeness of my being. So I'm really curious how that will uh, unravel itself over the next year or two and beyond. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and it's truly such a joy to be here with you all. So I hope this serves you.
Oh, thank you, Julia. Lovely descriptions you're giving. And so, Maura, would you like to go next?
Yes. Thank you, Melanie. Such
Great.
beautiful sharings. Like Dawn, I've been going through my own physical process, and I just have to touch back to the last meeting we had, and Heather told us the anonymous. And when I came through with as I was listening to her, I'm like, oh, I'm in that process again. I didn't really recognize that I was in that process. There was some loss and things, and it's been many times that I have in my life where I have actually been in that process. So I thought, oh, and I'm like, oh, well, okay. So I was scheduled for hip replacement surgery on my left side a few days after we had the last meeting, and it went perfect. It was great. It was wonderful. It was better than the other side on my right side. I was walking, not using any things within 2 weeks. It was wonderful. And about 5 weeks in, I started feeling pain in the leg. And I thought, okay, well, that happens, readjustments with muscles and all that kind of stuff. And then it got really bad and I took to bed. And the next day I got up to try and I was going to the bathroom and I fainted. I fell because the pain was so bad.
Mm.
So I was whisked to emergency and then ultimately back to the surgeon. And I had a second surgery exactly 6 weeks to the day I'd had the first one, which was on May 1st, which was, also Beltane. The recovery from the first one is much different than the recovery from the second. This is unbelievably slow, painful, and obviously on my left side. So that's a whole thing with the feminine and the wounding of the feminine, which I have spent a lot of my life, looking into and studying on the collective level as well as personal. So I'm in a place where I think I'm kind of in Nana, maybe coming off the meat hook now, but I'm certainly not all the way back up. And I went to a PT person yesterday. They said it'll be 3 to 6 months to get myself functional again. So this has been a year of like all the pain of the hips before, which is a foundational piece in our bodies, right? I mean, we need our hips. We need them to work. We need them to walk. We need them to do everything. And I'm walking with a limp right now, so I can relate to you, Dawn. And the whole year leading up to the surgeries was very painful. And then the surgeries have their own pain, and now this. So obviously, I'm being stopped. My body is my teacher. There is no way around that. She knows what she wants to do and where she wants to take me. I am not in as fluid of an explanation at this point as I felt like you were, Dawn, in your situation. I'm in the process. And I can't really tell you all the different ramifications. I know some things, but the daily routine is, can I get up? Can I get to the bathroom in time? Can I, go down the stairs? Can I get up the stairs? And that's been my life for the last 6 weeks. Plus a lot of in-home nursing, it's down to basic survival to a certain extent.
Mm.
And I have to, I've been on antibiotics. I was on massive amounts of antibiotics that were totally wrecking me, because I had an infection. That's why the hip collapsed. I forgot to say that. So they went in there and they cleaned that all out, put antibiotics in my hip. I had it in my blood. Also, that's cleared now, which is great because a systemic infection, as you said, with blood-wise is not a good thing. So it's been quite a process. And I was taken back into the place where I'd been several years ago, when I kind of collapsed in my 40s and really couldn't get up. And they diagnosed me with MS at that time. And I didn't know whether I was really going to make it or not make it. But I knew something bigger was going on. I knew it was a bigger process than what the physical was representing. And so it's taken me back in that place of, yes, all these other things are going on. And yes, it's difficult. And the only place to really go is centering and being in the heart center and allowing that paradox in the heart center, which the heart center can handle of, yes, I am not functional right now. And I'm not well, I guess I'm well enough, but I mean, I'm not functioning as well as I did. And I'm whole and I'm healed and I'm in alignment with the divine. And so holding those paradoxes, those opposites of knowing both things are true at the same time, looking at the masculine and feminine dimensions in this process that I'm going through, and how the feminine is being so sorry. denigrated at this particular time in so many ways in our collective. They're trying to denigrate. I don't believe it's going to work this time. But I feel in some ways, this whole left side. I had a PICC line in my left arm. I had a wound vac on my site of operation for 5 weeks. It was supposed to be 1 week, but I had it for 5 weeks. Took this little canister around with me everywhere. It was great. But the wound wasn't healing. I had so much liquid inside that it was pressing on the femoral nerve, and that was so painful. I ended up collapsing because of that. So this, there's the ocean, right? I mean, there's just so much symbolism and lessons for me at this point in this. And it's about taking one foot and putting it in front of the other, one foot and putting it in front of the other, literally. So I'd say that the beacon, being a beacon is really for me right now. Yeah, and I'm getting help, and that's great. And I also know it's incumbent upon me to find my inner center core, the willingness to keep moving forward, the willingness to be, as Julia was saying, just that cultivating presence and knowing that that's enough, and that somehow that will also heal at a very deep level, cellularly, I believe. But it's that place of the heart. To me, the beacon is the heart center. It's the activated heart center that's alive and and we all have that. We all are that, where love is, but love in all its very forms. The paradox included in that, as you were saying, Martha, with the dark and the light. It's not exclusive. It's not one or the other. It's both and. So these kinds of physical lessons are so deep and profound and have so many layers to them. And I would just say at this point, like I said, I'm still uncovering and still seeing, and what are the losses? What do I need to let go of? What do I keep letting go of? And then we don't know what the impulse is going to be that's going to come forward for what's new. And that's what I'm holding. There will be an impulse for something eventually that's supposed to move forward. But right now it's about being in where I am and honoring my body and what she's going through, which is tremendous at this point. So anyway, we're all a beacon at the heart. And I would just say, love is, the ultimate reason and energy that will heal everything. And cultivating presence and heart center and acceptance of what is extremely important, to be able to allow what wants to come forward. So thank you.
So thank you so much, Maura. Thank you. And for the crucial reminder to all of us on screen or out there watching, that including the experience of our own incapacity and frailty and quote unquote imperfectness, right, is such an important part of the whole journey. Because I think, in the kind of culture that all of us have come from, there's a big investment in the heroic,
Very much so.
and heroic self-improvement, getting better and better and lighter and all of that. And that's fine. But it's also important to include what is ailing and in pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
Thank you so much, Maura.
The vulnerability is extremely important in all this, to keep that alive and know that that's where our strength really comes from. It's from the
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Yeah, thank you, Maura. And so, Heather, would you like to follow?
Yes, thank you, Melanie. And it's an honor to be in Sacred Circle with all of you, hear the wisdom that you each have to share, and to be in Sacred Circle with all of those listening. What I want to share about being beacons of light and peace in the world in this time, I'd like to start with a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who was a peace activist. And he said, peace is only possible when we bring peace to our own being. If we stop the war in ourselves, then we can help stop the war in the world. And I've been thinking a lot about that, and we're each sharing in our own ways about being in our own deep healing process. And I think as we are now in the larger processional cycle, coming out of the Kali Yuga, the last 5,000 to 6,000 years of our collectively forgetting who we truly are and our deep connection with the earth and sky and spirit and each other, we're seeing a lot of purging happening. Physically, individually, as some of you are sharing, we're experiencing that, but collectively, I think part of what we're seeing with the turbulence, with the wars, with the violence, is the purging of the shadow aspects of humanity that we've been mired in for 5,000 to 6,000 years. And circling back to what you were sharing, Melanie, about the myths about Uranus, part of what I'm passionate about as an astrologer is we need to change the stories we project onto the planets. Mars does not have to be the Roman god of war. Uranus does not have to be a part of this lineage of males in conflict and competition with each other, castrating each other, challenging each other, killing each other. We have this opportunity now to each be in our own healing journey and come back to the heart. And I do believe that, as you were sharing, Melanie, Jupiter in Cancer is supporting us in that, to come back to compassion, come back to the ways we can be nurturing to ourselves and then to each other. I also love, and Melanie, you're the expert on this, that the healing centaur, Nessus, is conjunct to the North Node. The theme, as you would say, Melanie, is the buck stops here. That Nessus is about how do we each clear that ancestral trauma, the generational trauma that gets passed down over and over again, perpetuating the pain, the trauma, the turbulence. The time is now for each of us to do that inner work, to heal and clear what we need to clear, to come back to the heart, to then hold ourselves with compassion, to then be able to emanate that out into the collective consciousness. And as we do that, that is the most powerful form of social activism. To emanate that energy of love and peace and truth and justice allows us then to support the collective consciousness in waking up and healing and transforming so that we all can co-create a new earth together. I think it's beautiful too, as Jupiter is now moved into the sign of Cancer. It is moving into conjunction with the sun and will be exactly conjunct the sun at the time of the solstice in the sky in the upraised arm of Orion, which since ancient times, Orion and that upraised arm is a symbol of resurrection, order arising out of chaos. The sky is guiding us in that journey of healing and transformation. The earth herself is purging, clearing, healing, transforming, and guiding us to do the same. So I think the key is coming back to center, coming back to our hearts, doing that inner work that we need to do to heal and clear, to then be truly beacons of love and peace, emanating that into the world. Then we're living in harmony within ourselves and supporting the awakening of that in the collective. And we need to remember this past 5,000 to 6,000 years of the Kali Yuga is the aberration in the precessional cycle. We remember what it was like in ancient times to live in harmony, to live in peace, to live in right relationship with all that is. The earth and sky and our own soul selves are calling us back into that. So I just want to close with a poem. For me, this is a poem about peace. Peace is not a concept. It is not a wish or a dream. Peace is a lived reality. It is an in-breath of awareness that everyone and everything is sacred, and an out-breath of love from the heart, manifested in action and compassion. Blessed be.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you. A beautiful poem. And so, Anne, would you like to speak next?
Yes, I would be delighted to. And I would like to thank everyone who has spoken, because I've learned so much from listening to you. And you've been focusing on the physical and the relation to the transcendent, and you've done it all wonderfully clearly. So I think everyone listening will have benefited by what you have spoken. So I thank you. And I would say myself that having overdone the physical, finishing that index for my book, I've been completely incapacitated for about a month, unable to walk, unable to move, in great pain at night, having to take painkillers all the time. I've seen a chiropractor 6 times in the last 3 weeks, and he is fixing my body. But I just wanted to say the most important thing in my book was the first opening thing by William Blake. Everything that lives is holy. So I would like to follow what Heather said with that. And also the whole theme of really what I think is so important is that we have to change our image of God, because it is so stuck in the past, and it's fueling these terrible conflicts between the different patriarchal families, so to speak, who see themselves as rivals instead of as brothers. And so this is the most important thing that I think, said in my book, and which I'm also talking about whenever I can. So I've now got a frog in my throat because it's so difficult to express what I want to say. But unless we understand that nature had been split off from spirit 2,500 years ago with the loss of the goddess who represented nature, we can never heal the split in us, in our nature, between nature and spirit, between the earth and the heavens, so to speak. So we have to bring together these divided parts of ourselves, understanding where that great break in the umbilical cord between nature and spirit came from, heal the break and restore it in ourselves, which I think what is all the body work that we've been doing, all of us, is about, including me and my back, because the back is a symbol of the unconscious, and also the lower part, a part that I need for walking. I've always been able to walk. Now I can't walk. I can just stagger. I will be able to walk, the chiropractor says, but it will take time. And I have to be patient, like all of you, like poor Maura has to be patient. And Julia, to move from doing to being takes great patience. And Dawn, too, with all her triple affliction, so to speak. We're learning so much from each other and so much from what's going on in the collective, because we can see that there's no hope for the future unless we change our image of the divine, an image of God, to understand that everything that lives is holy, in Blake's words, and that we've never understood that because we've been looking at parts instead of wholes. So I think that's all I really would like to say, and would like to thank you so much for what your contributions have been, because I've learnt a huge amount, and I can look upon my own back problem as something I need to understand more deeply about the connection to what's in the back, so to speak, what's behind me, both historically and physically. And I think it's quite fascinating what we've been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I'm sure I speak for everybody in that, all of us who've mentioned various physical afflictions. May we enter the field of healing as well. So, Kelley.
Wow, so much, so rich. I'd like to start with a poem. Um, this is one of my favorite Rilke poems. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not ever complete the last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, that primordial tower. I have been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? I think that's where we're at now. It's like we're like kind of in a sort of identity crisis time. And we can come back to the fact that we essentially are light, that we are essentially the divine, and we're circling around ourselves. So I'm going to let you know what my physical thing is, and that's been my skin for like, gosh, a good number of years now. And realizing that the skin is the biggest organ in the body and it detoxifies, but also it's the membrane between our inner world and our outer world. And I've been doing quite a lot of consideration of myself in relation to others. And with a lot of vigilance is necessary and more patience than I basically have without, really, really going deeper. When I was considering this theme, being beacons of light and peace, I started thinking about the lighthouse keepers. And I watched a little video about the history of lighthouses and lighthouse keepers. And one of the main tasks of the lighthouse keeper, of course, is to keep the light burning. And that means a lot of maintenance of the light and the lens, however the light is shining. And so we need to be taking a lot of care and maintenance of our lighthouse. And that's the physicality, to some extent. And it's our multiple bodies, not just the physical, but Yes, there are many layers to any physical issue that can be born in the born, Borne, in the emotional body, the mental body, or the lack of spiritual connection, which is sort of the essence or sort of the heart of the disturbance and the darkness. We don't have a very wide range of visible light. So when Martha was talking about the void and the darkness, we just don't have the perception to see the subtle light that is dancing in the dark. We don't see it, but we can feel it. And the light that emerges from the center point, that very center point that's right in the middle of that six-pointed star. It's like called the Bindu in Indian philosophy. And that's the point that is the emergence of everything. And it also reminds me of the fact that astrologically we have a lot going on around the Aries point, which is the end and beginning of the zodiac, and that this is a new beginning in so many ways. So many ages are culminating at this point. And then we've got our zodiac point, which is the emergence of the light. It's the bringer of the light. And going back to what you were saying, Melanie, about Cancer, Jupiter going into Cancer, I was so relieved when Jupiter went into Cancer because I felt like, okay, maybe things are going to kind of calm down a little bit. Or we're also being brought into that back to this self-care. Lighthouse keepers have to get food, they have to get their needs met, even if they're stranded out there in a remote lighthouse. Um, they have attention on that light, but they need nurturing and help as well. And although Jupiter's gone into Cancer, the sign in which it's exalted, the first part of Cancer is in the moon mansion of the Vedic moon mansions. And I don't know a whole lot about the moon mansions, but I know about the ones in Cancer because that's where my moon is. So the first half of the Jupiter in Cancer is in the moon mansion of the teardrop. And this is a stormy section of a stormier moon mansion than a lot of moon mansions. So we're getting the stormy part first. And then when we get to the middle of August and Jupiter aligns with Venus and the brightest star, Sirius, that's when it enters, well, maybe it enters a little sooner, but it's Punarvasu. And that's the name of the moon mansion. It's the moon mansion that is called the Star of Renewal. And so there's the light coming back. I think that moon mansion starts earlier. I'm kind of losing my math here, but um, it's also ruled over by Aditi, who is the boundless vastness, the limitless sky. She embodies infinity and primordial vastness. She is the goddess of protection, forgiveness, wealth, and abundance. She is the mother of all the Buddhas. She is like an ultimate divine goddess, mother, the great mother. And great mothers, are also very human. We've got the great divine mother, and we've got, many of us have been mothers. We've all had mothers. So the whole mothering energy and the nurturing energy is really enhanced here, really, it's amplified. That's one of my favorite Jupiter words. But it's also inviting us to the wisdom of self-nurturing and to be at the ready, keeping that light going. Being a lighthouse keeper takes vigilance, precision, and stamina. So I read. And we are asked to bring to the table kind of all of those things. But the one that grabs me the most, apart from stamina, and precision, but vigilance. Because in my process at the moment, I'm really needing to be quite vigilant about how I'm interacting with other people and how much I can handle interacting with other people. Being a lighthouse keeper is a kind of isolated, kind of situation. And I am fortunate to live in a beautiful, like wooded, rural area that's quite out of the beaten path and 4 miles of dirt road in any direction. And I have a sanctuary here that I am so grateful for because I can, kind of settle in and feel that light and keep that light burning and do my own spiritual process and take care of myself bodily and emotionally. And so I'm very grateful for that. And then, you know, I live my life in widening circles until I have to come back home again. And I just find that even with small groups, I'm highly aware of the complexity of dynamics. And sometimes it's like, whoa, and then Cancer has to go back and kind of process, kind of contemplate and sort of chew over it, digest it. So that's part of the Cancer energy. Um, so I did want to mention that subtle light that we can't see with our physical eyes, that we have to tune into, and maybe it's being in the dark, in the solitude, at times. And lighthouse keepers have to be ready to do rescues or to signal when there's fog. They have to respond to emergencies. They have a big responsibility. And, bringing that back home, to take care of ourselves, I think is part of that. Um, so I want to end with another poem. And this is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And I was like searching for poems about the lighthouse. He wrote one called The Lighthouse. And I'm only going to read two stanzas because it's a longer story. And as the evening darkens, lo, how bright through the deep purple of the twilight air beams forth the sudden radiance of its light with strange, unearthly splendor in the glare. Steadfast, serene, immovable, the same year after year through all the silent night burns on forevermore that quenchless flame, shines on that inextinguishable light.
Oh, thank you so much, Kelley. What a lovely poem. So I think we've all spoken a little bit, and I would like to hand us back to Martha for whatever you have to say for us.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be as brief as I can. Um, Out of everything, which, everything was incredibly beautiful. Thank you. The thing that I could have broken down crying immediately was, Anne, when you said everything is holy. Wow. Um, yeah, I think that for me, touches on a key component in this moment. And something my guides keep bringing me back to is the need to fully claim my own and really support others to fully claim their own complete power of who we actually are, the totality that we are source itself, that we are the divine itself. And so in this time of forgetting that we've been in, the illusion of separation, I think one of the many things that we're unlearning is doubting that. Yeah. Um, and yeah, and I just see it over and over and over again when I'm witnessing other people's processes when they, come into my spaces and there's a lot of self-doubt, and then slowly, or actually sometimes very quickly, that leaves. And then all of a sudden, it's like this butterfly just appears. It's amazing. And then, like I was mentioning at the beginning, the divine puzzle piece that's meant to emerge through every single being is just here. It's like, oh my goodness, I could just cry for days just with that. It's so exquisite and exactly what we need right now. Um, so related to that, the thing I'm being asked to mention also is another thing that's been really alive for me. Also related to that is the presence of the stars themselves, and the fact the two major things I feel holding us in this time are, number one, the void source. Um, what I would call a council of infinity, meaning like all benevolent beings. But in particular, for me, the stars have been so alive, and I feel them as literal ancestral council, because that is what they are. They are our physical ancestry, right? We are made of what comes out of stars. So our bodies are made from them. And I think going back to what Julia said about switching from the doing to the being, among so many other reasons that that's so helpful and key, is because we know neurobiologically that helps us come from more maybe a fight or flight mode into the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps to turn on the part of us that is relaxed and open and suddenly can have these bigger solutions, the bigger picture answers come in through us, right? So just one really brief example of this for me in the last week was astrologically, we're kind of still in this Mars Uranus square, which on the one level, especially given what's been going on in the world, I saw that coming, and I saw what was going on in the world, and I had a lot of fear rise up in me, especially given that I live near a lot of what was going on that looked like it could have potentially been very difficult, right? So I stopped. I forced myself to stop for a moment, and I went into that more being place, and I went into my praying. And what suddenly came alive for me is the reality that Uranus is not just that Uranus is squaring Mars, is Uranus right now is entering to be with the Pleiades. And actually today, Mars is precisely conjunct Regulus. So so then I went, oh, wow. And I actually channeled a video on my YouTube channel if you want to see if you want to experience the whole channeling, but of the Regulus energy combining with the Palladian energy. And what came through in that when I went into that place was Regulus is the heart of Leo the lion, right? And Regulus is very near the ecliptic. So Mars really, really is with Regulus right now. And in the channeling, that Regulus energy basically helped us embody ourselves as the sacred leader, the lion, the heart-centered leadership, the heart light in the world. And then the Palladian energy came in as these like a council of light holding ourselves as the lion. It was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Really. Wow. So it took me from this fear intensity of, how could power be very difficult, right? Power imbalance get very difficult to, oh, no, this is actually the opportunity here. And the stars are literally holding us and helping us raise way up into what's actually possible. And, without going into it, right? I think we saw a lot of that heart-centered presence in the world, actually, is what I saw happening in my community, at least. And I was stunned that, right, that there's not one scenario that's, guaranteed to happen. It's no, no, no. When we drop into that just being place and we rise into the possibilities that we're being held in, that I think that's the key of how we co-create this world. And we are those beacons of peace and light and all of it. Oh, and to say, yes, I also am actually holding a free gathering on solstice. And so the link is here if anybody's interested. But yeah, thank you. Melody, do you want to close out or do you want me to close out?
You go ahead, Mother.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you, Melanie, for mediate or what's the word? Facilitating this. Um, and yeah, I feel called to just help us come back into the reality that we are in this sacred circle all together, those of us here on the screen, and those of you watching, being part of this in spirit. We are literally together. We are held by the void. We are held by the reality that we are all divine. We are all source. We're being held by those stars. We're being held by Gaia, the infinite benevolent realms, powerfully dedicated to supporting us in this moment. We are absolutely not alone ever. And also the wisdom of our bodies, as many of us mentioned. And we can feel all of the beacons of light, the particles of light that we all are, the beacons of peace that we all are. We can imagine ourselves in the sacred circle coming into a vast sacred circle all around the globe, beyond the globe. We can imagine us each honoring and sending sacred fire, sacred flame into the center of this sacred circle in concert with Gaia, held by the vast cosmos, the infinity of the stars, held by all of those infinite benevolent realms. And we can send that beacon of light that we literally all are, every single one of us, individually and especially together. We can send it to bless every single one of us individually, to bless this whole beautiful being we call Earth, and to bless all of time, all of space, blessing everything. And so it is. Amen. Thank you all so much.